911, do you need paramedics or police?
911 emergency.
In an emergency, when every second matters, you certainly want to know you have a working fire hydrant. That's why Chris Gobin was worried when someone from the D.C. Fire Department came up her street, Oregon Knolls Drive, and put out-of-service signs on the closest hydrants.
We were thinking, let's pray we don't have a fire.
Praying and waiting as days turned into weeks and then months.
And then I started calling the fire department. What are you going to do? And they said, well, that's not our responsibility.
That's right. D.C. says the hydrants on Chris Gobin Street are not the city's responsibility.
I was very, very surprised.
Just a few miles down the road on Broad Branch Terrace, John Yates got a similar surprise.
Never had given it a thought. Never had given it a thought. I just assumed that it was a fire hydrant like all the other tens of thousands of fire hydrants in the city that somebody looked after, not me.
But Chris and John have something called a private fire hydrant. Never heard of it? Neither had they. This is a list of the city's 1,400 private hydrants. Most of them are at universities and hospitals, but there are also some private hydrants that serve single-family homes. Here's an example on Klingle Road, just off Porter Street. Some were put in years ago by developers on what the city considers private streets. Did you have any idea when you moved in here?
None.
And it's not just the fire hydrants. It's what's underground, too. You see, the city has told residents here at Oregon Knolls that if the underground water line should happen to break somewhere between here and way down here at Oregon Avenue, the residents would be responsible for the repair.
So we're afraid because the city has done nothing to maintain this, obviously. So we're afraid that we're going to have a sewer backup.
The sewer may cost them in the future. The hydrants already have. Take a look at the D.C. Fire Department's report about the hydrants on Oregon Knolls. One requires maintenance, one is obstructed, and a third is buried.
We talked to the fire department until a million times, and then we convinced the neighbors that we had to pony up.
So you just broke down at some point and said, we've got to know that these things are working,
Right.
and it's going to have to come out of our pockets.
Right.
Gobin has high praise for the fire department's dedication to informing the residents and guiding her through a process she knew nothing about. Did you ever imagine you'd be in the business of shopping for fire hydrants?
Never.
The Oregon Knolls Residents Association spent about $18,000 on 2 new hydrants. It's money that the residents think the city should have paid. You see, these private hydrants were put in years ago by developers, people like architect Jack Brady. He helped develop the Broad Branch Terrace site where John Yates lives. He says the city required the extra hydrant before handing over the permits. So it's a safety issue?
Absolutely, yes.
Phil Mendelson chairs the City Council's Committee on Public Safety.
I would say nobody's done wrong here except for the city, which didn't think ahead when, over the last several decades, it permitted these hydrants.
DC Water is responsible for maintaining the city's more than 9,000 public hydrants. George Hawkins is the general manager.
Any landowner who comes in and is not anticipating a cost on something that important is obviously going to be concerned, and my heart goes out to them.
But Hawkins says he can't help. In August 2009, the D.C. Water Authority sent this letter to Chris Gobin and her neighbors. The letter says there is no record of a covenant or easement that conveys responsibility for this private system and its hydrants to the District of Columbia.
So they're saying we can't find it, and we believe them because we can't find it either. But how does that make us responsible, the absence of the document?
The City Council has passed emergency legislation to require specific record keeping before allowing private hydrants in the future. But that does not help homeowners already impacted.
I'm very concerned about it, and I'm concerned because at some point there will be a fire, and a hydrant will be needed, and the hydrant is not working, and everybody's going to point fingers and blame somebody else.
After a big fire at the Georgetown Library in 2007, D.C. Fire and EMS teamed with D.C. Water to help identify, inspect, and repair public hydrants. In that process, Yates says he bumped into a firefighter on his street, and that's how he learned he had a private hydrant.
It was by chance that I ran into him.
A fire spokesman tells Fox 5 the fire department is simply the end user of hydrants. DC Water says it's not authorized to repair private hydrants.
There are private hydrants. We do not know their condition as well as we should, and a solution is necessary.
When we asked whether the city could assure Fox 5 that every DC resident who has a private hydrant has been notified, the answer was no.
I think that we're not alone, and I think it's important.
Yates says nobody else should get this surprise, and certainly not at the moment, when firefighters are working to save lives and homes. In Washington, Beth Parker, Fox 5 News.